And members, we are still on Senate File 4269. Senator Ingebrigtsen, will you move to take it off the table?
Madam Chair, I move the Senate File 4269 from the table.
On that motion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Motion prevails. Senator Senjem, I think we are on amendments at this time. Senator Kent.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Not quite. I have an amendment to offer.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're good.
I would like to offer the A17 amendment, please.
Senator Kent moves the A17 amendment. So,
I thought we were done, but I do know about this one.
I know.
Can I get a second copy? Thank you. Okay, thank you.
Senator Kent.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciated something you said earlier today about making sure that we maximize federal dollars. And that is really the spirit of this bill, in addition to addressing issues about energy and climate change in our environment. What this bill does is three basic parts. First, it asks the Commissioner of Commerce to create an electric vehicle infrastructure deployment plan for state use of funding from the National EV Infrastructure Formula Program under the IIJA. And it specifies the approach and the charge of this plan. The second part is accessibility requirements for installation of EV charging stations. And it basically says that until the state building code is amended to reflect such requirements, that we should use the MPCA's installation requirements guidance from January of 2021 with some other language there. And then the last part is EV infrastructure deployment, $20 million in fiscal year 23, appropriated from the general fund to the Commissioner of Commerce for electric vehicle infrastructure. And there are two parts here that I think are really helpful. One is specific to matching the federal funds from the Department of Energy or other federal entity, and also to leverage federal formula and competitive funds for energy-related EV infrastructure deployment investments through Minnesota. And again, we know this is a competitive grant process, and we want to make sure that we are providing the matching funds that set us up to be as successful as possible in bringing those dollars to Minnesota and not, say, New Jersey or Colorado or other places that we know are being very aggressive as well. So members, that is the A17 amendment, and I would encourage the support for the strength of Minnesota.
Thank you, Senator Kent. I'm having Mr. Nauman look at what is in the IIJA for electric vehicles and that infrastructure. I know there is some money there. Maybe, perhaps, Senator Senjem, do you happen to know?
There certainly is for the charging. I assume the third part of this is charging stations, electric vehicle infrastructure deployment. I assume that translates into charging stations, and there is for that. And
Madam Chair,
Senator Kent.
there's a separate section that is referred to as NEVI, which is the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Formula Program, and that's what's outlined in the first part in lines 1.5, 1.6.
Mr. Nauman, could you please read that?
Madam Chair and Senator Kent, I'm referencing a fiscal issue brief that was prepared by our office back in January. So some of these numbers might be a little dated, but at that time, there was $68.2 million that was expected to be received through the National Electric Vehicle Program. I think that's the one that you just cited, Senator Kent. It requires states to submit plans on how the funds will be used and then draw down federal funds after the plans have been reviewed in Washington.
Mr. Nauman,
Madam
what
Chair.
we have in the transportation bill is the match, the governor's match for the federal infrastructure bill. Is that correct? 280 million and,
Yes, Madam Chair, I won't claim to know exactly what is being matched there, but there is $280 million that is part of the transportation match. That was the discussion that we were working through yesterday in terms of whether the general fund dollars were being fed through into matching the IIJA programs. We can have others provide that answer if that's helpful.
and that is the governor's match. And so, Senator Kent, I believe the 20 million in subdivision 6 is for, number one, meet the match requirements for federal funds, which we already have through the federal, through the transportation bill.
Madam
And
Chair?
leverage federal formula and competitive funds, which we are already doing. So I don't think that's necessary.
Madam Chair, and we heard testimony yesterday from the Commissioner of Transportation, and this is something that has been observed. The way the transportation bill structures, particularly around electric vehicles, it puts so many limitations on them that, and this was in the testimony from the Commissioner, I specifically asked this question, the belief is that it will limit our ability to be competitive as we seek those matching funds. Because it's a pool and it's a competitive process, and we will be competing with states around the country. And because there are just a lot of limitations on the ability to use those for electric vehicles and other things, that's why this is carved out here in the energy, as an energy amendment, because the need is there, those dollars are going to be there, and this is a flexible way to approach that and hopefully maximize our ability to capture some of those funds.
But then again, Senator Kent, we did match the governor's request for that, for the IIJA match. We did match the governor's. So I just want to make sure that you understand that
Well,
this
Madam-
is a double dipping here.
Well, Madam Chair, I understand in principle we have matched it, but we've put so many handcuffs on it, we're not going to be able to fully achieve that match, if that makes sense.
No, you're making sense. Senator Marty, and then we'll go to Senator Senjem.
Madam Chair, on the point that Senator Kent was making, I believe the bill yesterday prohibited any state funds from being used to match electric vehicle infrastructure money from the federal government. That was one of the things we had an amendment to take out, but I believe the bill explicitly said you cannot use state money for it. So this bill would be, in that sense, Senator Kent's money is needed for it. It would be contradicting the other bill, which I assume means depends which one would pass last, but there is no match for the electric vehicle charging station money because it specifically said no state funds can be used for it. So this would be going the other direction to make sure there are state funds available for it.
Thank you, Senator Marty. Senator Senjem.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And members, just looking at, I mean, I'll just go 1, 2, 3 here. You know, the idea of a plan, you know, we talked about plans this morning, but there's a lot of activity going on. I know in Department of Transportation on EV charging structures and you know the transition to that new world, so to speak. Even to the point where there have been meetings around the state taking state input. And that said, I don't necessarily think that I think that's all a good idea. It's just whether or not it needs to be formalized into a plan. What worries me about saying yes, even though my emotions would suggest that this is kind of a good idea, is that I'm making a decision here, you know, as you see line 10, it's jurisdiction over transportation. I don't have jurisdiction over transportation. I feel pretty uncomfortable saying okay to that. If it frankly it said the Energy Committee, I'd probably say good idea, let's go. But for today, I don't feel comfortable with that. And I think Senator Newman's, most of the infrastructure relative to EV charging stations is in the transportation menu, if you will, of the Infrastructure Act and not in the energy area. So I casually oppose that. The second one I'm not sure I understand is that the accessibility with respect to disabilities. And if it is, I think that's probably already in federal law. You've got to make these accessible from the standpoint of a disabled person. So I don't know what that really means. Maybe the author can help me on that. And then with respect to the $20 million, and this is what I talked about maybe this morning, I know the Commerce Department does have a $20 million ask, and we're hearing that bill actually right now next door, that we might be again approaching this committee later on as we understand better the whole idea of the Infrastructure Act and matches and things like that, which we don't, frankly, today. We're getting closer, I think, but we just don't understand it. And so my hope is in the next, whatever we have left of this session, that will come to be, that we'll better understand it and be able to come forward with a proposal and see if there's support for it. But so today I would, as it's written here today, I would oppose this, but I mean, it's all things that we have to pay attention to going forward.
Thank you, Senator Senjem. And I do think, I don't know if I mentioned this to the committee or not, but it's time to have, I think the State Director on Amingi is the authority on the IAJA to this point with some of the guidelines. And we should have a hearing on that fairly soon when we get back to figure out what's happening with that. Senator Kent.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just to respond to a couple of things that Senator Senjem mentioned, the idea on the second one is, because this is all relatively new, until the national models of the building codes are updated, I think that's why this is saying until, and then the state by statute has to follow the national code. I think this is saying until then we should use these other guidelines for disability, for accessibility requirements. So it's creating that approach until the state building code is amended to include accessibility requirements for installing EV charging stations. Since this is relatively new technology, I think that just doesn't exist yet, is why this matters. And again, people are going to vote how they're going to vote on this amendment, but to your point, Senator Senjem, I believe what we did for electric vehicle charging stations in the transportation bill was to put them in state rest areas where federal law allows. That's it. We really are not doing what we need to do as a state with that bill and with prohibitions in that bill to try to pursue it even further. It is hostile to electric vehicle charging stations and electric vehicles in a number of ways. And so when I said earlier, you were talking about we're on that path, and I specifically said on this one path, we're going backwards. And so this is an effort to recognize that electric vehicles are coming. We have an opportunity to embrace them and to maximize them so that when the auto manufacturers' fleets are completely electric, we're ready. And you mentioned thinking about trying to get to your district in an electric vehicle. Well, if we can embrace this plan and get everything outfitted, we can get there. But what we did yesterday is going to hinder that process, which I think hinders the competitiveness and the direction that we're headed here in Minnesota. And so that is why I thought it was important to bring this amendment forward, and I would encourage a green vote.
Thank you, Senator Kent. I do think that a lot of this is absolutely in the realm of transportation. I am going to invite Senator Newman and Senator Senjem when we do have that discussion with MMB about the matching funds and the IAJA and the regulations or the guidelines for that, because I think this is premature. And Senator Kent, and I think, there's some pieces in here that are definitely worthy of the discussion, but we're not there yet. Senator Pratt.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. And along that line, I would say that Section 30, line 1.12 on the bill is probably premature as well. Department of Labor is already looking at what those building codes should be. There's a process to go through a stakeholder engagement. I think it's inappropriate for us to drop this language into this bill. First of all, it would be in Senator Rarick's labor bill, first and foremost. But then second, I think it's premature for us to jump ahead of the Department of Labor reviewing those building codes in their process.
Thank you, Senator Pratt. Senator Marty.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, to the last issue that Senator Pratt raised, this language was in Senator Rarick's bill. I know because I asked him to put it there, and he did put it there. This came from the Council on Disability because The trouble is, Senator Pratt, the building codes folks have, at Dowley and everywhere else, have worked out some language for this. But because the building code is on a, 6-year cycle, the last iteration came out a year ago or so, the version that's going to have this kind of language in it won't be out for 5 years or 4 years yet. And by that time, all these stations will be put in place. So this was a temporary one to use some guidelines that are already out there. And Senator Senjem is right to the extent that if they put in these stations without this, they are likely to be sued under ADA. When, I don't know, but I think it would make sense to do that. In any case, this is something that was just because we think if you're putting in charging stations, they ought to be available to everyone, including those with physical disabilities, mobility disabilities. And so that's a small part of it, but I just wanted you to know this is not contrary to what the building codes folks are doing. It's basically the same language, but it's somewhere where it's already available for not some unadopted rule, but it's what was used in the Volkswagen settlement and so on. So I don't think that's a controversial provision. I think the controversy becomes, and I believe the reason it was going to be taken out in your committee was because the Transportation Committee would have required a stop for that. To the rest of the provision here, I just want to remind folks that, Madam Chair, when you were talking about how we're already providing this, the language in the transportation bill, which Senator Senjem wouldn't have reason to have seen unless he's on that committee, it says under this section, electric vehicle infrastructure program requirements, match requirements. The required match funding for electric vehicle infrastructure formula or discretionary grant programs related to the Federal Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act must be committed only from non-state sources. Meaning all the money we set aside in that other bill or in the bill you're going to hear in a couple weeks or whenever, that money wouldn't be able to be used as a match for this. My pitch is we put it in here, and if you get a chance to hear that $20 million in the governor's bill sometime soon, that would be great, but let's make the money available for it. And on that point of you hoping to hear that the governor's bill in your committee soon, I hope you do, just so you understand, as a member of the minority, I haven't seen the targets. Every day you know the targets you've got, and the chair has these priority lists and everything else, but nobody else does. The public doesn't know. We as members of the Senate don't know because nobody's sharing it with us. It's the least transparent process I've seen. I mean, it's just, you know if you're going to have a chance to put that $20 million in. I don't. And I don't think anybody in the minority has a clue of it because we haven't seen any of the targets or priorities or whatever you're calling them. You've had several terms for them, but we don't know. And I just want you to understand that we're not trying to play games about it. We just don't know what you have. And we're hoping so. And my pitch is to you, as one who thinks we are moving towards electric vehicles, that maybe we ought to be trying to do this. And this isn't the Transportation Committee. We saw the bill yesterday and didn't take that out of it, but you're not on the Transportation Committee and you can present something like this, accept something like this here. And I think it's the best way to deal with it, to say we're not okay with that, because we do think the state should not be blocking receipt of this federal funding by trying to make it hard by saying we can't use any state match for that.
Senator Marty, I do think that this is an amendment that should be in the transportation arena. I'm very concerned about line 31, that it goes to 2034, this $20 million, when the IIJA is only for a 5-year, needs to be spent within the 5 years. So I'm not certain, what is happening there. I just really feel like we need to take a vote on this A17. It's got some good pieces to it, Senator Marty, Senator Kent, but it is not appropriate for the energy bill at this time. And this should have been discussed probably in transportation, but I think that, the deployment plan, that's an interesting, I'm glad you didn't have any fiscal note on that, but I'm surprised the Commissioner of Commerce doesn't already have a deployment plan, and maybe he does, but. I don't know if this is necessarily the committee for this to be discussed or brought forward. I know
Well-
that it's the last train out, and so this is where the A17 is
And
wanting
Madam Chair,
Senator Kent.
just to say, we tried to make that clear yesterday in the transportation bill, that the limitations, and again, I specifically asked the commissioner this question, that the limitations inherent in the bill, including and especially around electric vehicles, handcuff that process and are going to really impede our ability to get those funds and to make these necessary investments in our state. And so here we are again. That's why it's important. It matters. That's why I felt it was important to bring it forward again. And I appreciate that the attention that is being given to it. And I hope that as we continue to go through this process over the rest of this session, that we will take a really serious look at what that transportation bill does to our ability to try to get Minnesota taxpayers have paid into that fund.
Senator Kent, can you tell me why it's 2034?
Madam Chair, honestly, I am not sure where that particular piece came from.
Okay, good.
I'm sure it's tied to something I just don't at this point.
That's a long time. Okay.
Madam Chair,
Senator
can I just say, this is just me, certainly not the committee, but there is a lot in that infrastructure bill that covers a lot of space. Broadband, certainly in the area of energy, it's weatherization, it's hydrogen, it's grid, on and on and on. And we haven't had these discussions yet because this is just pretty new on us all. I mean, the Infrastructure Act was out there, but the reality of it just hasn't soaked in yet, and we just honestly got and Senator Marty, the governor's bill is being heard as I speak next door, so we're prompt on that. We just got it last Wednesday, so we've done pretty well on that. But I just think that somehow the respective committees need to group up. We need to get an expert in here to kind of tell us where the match requirements are and where they're not. I walked in here today honestly believing that we've got, I thought 66 million, but he says 68 too, coming just for infrastructure, and that was just going to be a check with no match. But we only know what we know, and we gotta know what we need to know accurately. And I don't think I do today, but I think we need to before we adjourn in a few weeks.
Absolutely.
And I think we have time to do that.
I
But we
do
just
too.
got to do it right. That's all I'm saying.
Right. I agree, Senator Senjem, and I think I make the commitment to get the committee and to the chairs who are involved with this federal infrastructure bill apprised, and we'll have a good meeting.
Madam Chair, there's $9.2 billion worth of hydrogen innovation and development in there. Minnesota has to be part of that menu. I just believe to the heart. We're an innovation state, and for goodness sakes,
You've been talking hydrogen forever.
we can't, and we've done great things out in Morris, and certainly XL's doing great things, but
Yeah.
and so we've got some abilities here, not only to create kilowatts, so to speak, or reduce energy, but certainly, make an industry out of this, and that's the important thing.
Very good. Okay.
Madam
Senator
Chair,
Kent.
roll call, please.
Roll call requested, roll call granted. The clerk will take the roll.
Chair Rosen,
Chair votes no.
Vice Chair Ingebrigtsen,
No.
Senator Marty,
Yes.
Senator Benson,
No.
Senator Champion,
Yes.
Senator Johnson,
No.
Senator Kent,
Yes.
Senator Kiffmeyer,
No.
Senator Lopez Franzen,
Yes.
Senator Pratt,
No.
There being 4 ayes and 6 noes, A17 is not adopted. I'm sorry, I do that every time. Okay. Senator Senjem, any further thoughts? Closing comments? I don't see further
Any more
amendments.
amendments? Okay. No, thank you, Madam Chair and members, for considering this bill. Hopefully, it'll move out of this committee now and onto the floor. But it's an exciting time in energy, and I'm just excited to be part of it in some small way, and to be able to chair our committee going forward. But we all know that I think we're on an energy transition worldwide, not certainly only in Minnesota. And we have to recognize that. I think we have to step up to it, and I think we'll do that. We just got to do it in a smart sort of way, and as I just said, in a way that not only recognizes certainly energy conservation, clean energy going forward, but the economic virtues of the transition going forward. Minnesota can be a winner in this, and I hope that we are. So thank you very much.
Very good. Thank you very much, Senator Senjem. Senator Ingebrigtsen.
Madam Chair, I move the Senate File 4269 be laid on the table.
On that motion, all those in
Chair.
favor say aye. Oh, Senator Marty?
Madam Chair, can I ask the plan how these bills are all being laid on the table? When are we taking them off the table?
So we are going to compile, let's see, how are you doing this thing? Oh, thank you. Mr. Fisher had to remind me, they are all going to go into Senator Pratt's jobs bill.
Madam Chair, how many things are going into the,
There'll be Senator Ingebrigtsen's, Senator Tomassoni's, and that's it. Senator Senjem, Senator Tomassoni, and Senator Pratt's bill will all be one. Okay. So on that motion, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
no?
The motion prevails. Thank you, Senator Senjem. Go to your committee. Did good work. Jobs. Thank you. What's that? Oh, funny. Yeah. We're not doing a lyrics program. No, that's going into jobs.
And we'll pick up the road, the Tomassoni bill and the Senjem bill, and there'll be a motion to put those into.
Yeah, but what is this stuff right
It's
here?
a spreadsheet for
These
jobs.
guys do that. That's it?
It's kind of farcical.
Okay. Senator Pratt, when you are ready.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Oh, Senator Rarick, welcome back. You know, if you're here twice in one day, you're supposed to bring treats. I don't know. I just made that up too, maybe.
She doesn't enforce the rules.
I don't enforce rules. I owe you guys donuts because my first time in front of this committee was this morning. All right, Senator Pratt.
Thank you. Madam Chair, I'm just going to give a brief introduction and let Mr. Mumm and Ms. Doyle-Fontaine go through the bill. Then I have an amendment to work in, and then we can have some discussion. So, Madam Chair, first, I'd like to just kind of walk back. Last year, the legislature and the Jobs Committee made economic recovery a priority by passing a large and comprehensive budget bill. First, we met the budget request by the agencies under our jurisdiction. Additionally, we included several provisions that helped Minnesota recover from the COVID recession. We created a $150 million economic recovery program called Main Street Recovery Plan. It provided $70 million in direct grants to small businesses that had been hurt by Governor Walz's shutdowns but didn't receive grants in previous rounds. And it put $80 million to spur capital development and investment in economic development projects. We spent $84 million out of the Workforce Development Fund to help people get back to work as businesses reopened. We expanded the appropriation to launch Minnesota to help innovative startups with hopes that these new businesses would create jobs for the 21st century. We put $13 million into child care grants to assure that parents have an affordable and accessible place for their children and help remove that barrier to employment. We removed UI unemployment insurance deductions and prohibitions for working, retired, and high school-aged Minnesotans who were hurt by the record layoffs of 2020. And we supported pregnant women and nursing mothers with new workforce protections. And I bring that up just to remind members how much was done in our biennial cycle already. So this session, the priorities have been public safety, education, and tax relief. Minnesota families have been hurting from inflationary policies at the national level. Excuse me. Last year, nominal wages grew 4.7% to an average of $31 per hour. However, the average real wage, which is the change in wages after raises and inflation, fell 2.4% in 2021. Minnesota families are struggling to make ends meet with rising gas, food, and housing prices. So, Madam Chair, this bill builds upon last session's work with modest changes in spending and policy, and I'll ask fiscal staff and council to walk through the bill.
Thank you, Senator Pratt. Mr. Mum.
Madam Chair and members, there should be two spreadsheets in your packet. One is for Senate File 3881, which is the labor policy bill. That bill's not before the committee, but there is, don't want to get ahead of Senator Pratt, but I think there will be an amendment that adds the contents of that bill into the jobs bill. But anyway, it contains a $25,000 appropriation in fiscal year 23 for the Youth Skills Training Program. It's a one-time appropriation from the general fund. The second spreadsheet in your packets is for Senate File 4091, which is the Omnibus Jobs Bill. It contains two appropriations. One is for $175,000 in fiscal year 23 from the general fund, one time, for a study of police, firefighter, and state trooper benefits. And the second appropriation is from the Workforce Development Fund for $50,000 for the Abijahs on the Backside grant. These are both appropriations to the Department of Labor and Industry. Madam Chair, that's those are the spreadsheets.
Thank you, Mr. Mum. Ms. Doyle-Fontaine, anything that you would like to add before we get to the amendment?
Oh, sure. Madam Chair, so I will try to keep it brief. I don't necessarily need to go through all the policy items. I think Mr. Mum went through the appropriations. There is a section that is similar to something that was contained in the bill last year that would extend for another year to allow recipients of job creation grants and the MIF grants to extend any requirements to meet certain requirements of the agreement. So they would get one more year to do that. And they wouldn't have to pay back the grants. So this would allow that. In Section 2, there are a number of provisions in here that I don't need to go through one by one, but they are, Senator Draheim, he had some bills regarding information from nonprofits about compensation for executives at nonprofits and some other oversight of grants that are contained in here. Section 2 of Article 2 does allow the Commissioner of Deed to transfer some of the community energy transition administrative expenses to the Environmental Quality Board to assist with the communities with regulatory coordination. So I don't know how that would be tracked, but this would allow for that transfer. And then there are a number of provisions that are also included in here from the governor's bill, just to allow certain recipients of grants to allow federally recognized tribes, and then clarify that hospitals and tribal governments can receive certain grants, some modifications of some definitions. And Senator Pratt also has a couple of provisions in here that would continue to clarify some of the wage theft requirements that are in the notice that goes to new employees. So that is contained in here as well. And there is, in Section 15 is a report that would be required from DEED regarding overpayments that were made due to fraud in the unemployment insurance system. And this came out of the Office of Legislative Auditor report that they did on these overpayments. And I believe DEED has probably some recommendations on how to tweak that language, but it is contained in here. And then finally, there's another section from a Senator Draheim bill that would specify that grants that come from the Workforce Development Fund, a certain portion would need to be for pay-for-performance grants. And so it specifies a percentage of 25% in fiscal year '24, and then in fiscal year '25, 50% of the workforce development grants would need to be from the for pay-for-performance grants. And that's kind of just a high-level overview of that bill.
Thank you, Ms. Doyle-Fontaine. So pay for performance is being utilized. Passed that bill in 2012, and it never really kicked in. So I'm glad to see that it's being utilized. Senator Pratt, we do have the A5 amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to move the A5 amendment. This brings in Senator Rarick's labor bill into the jobs bill. Pre-COVID, jobs and labor were one committee, and as we had to split up and make smaller committees to still get the work done, I've appreciated Senator Rarick's partnership. I think we work pretty good together. Not bad. And so I'll let Ms. Fontaine or Senator Rarick explain what's in the amendment.
Senator Rarick, welcome. Thank you very much for being here again. Do you have any comments, Senator Rarick, that you'd like to say, and then I can turn it over to Ms. Fontaine.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess I can go through it as well. I've got the notes. And, I as well appreciate Senator Pratt. The working relationship we've had has been very good. Mr. Mumm already talked about the $25,000 appropriation that's in 3881. Section 1 is agreed upon language from Senator Housley's Senate File 62 around window cleaning and safety attachments. Section 2 is a piece from the department. They had a provision to lower some fees. We made it permanent. Sections 3 through 5 are from Senate File 2442. This is also agreed upon language around the elevator code to allow millwrights to do work on certain types of lifts. Section 6 and 7 is from Senate File 181. This is a provision that I've been working on with a number of stakeholders for over 3 years. We are getting close. This language kind of represents electrical co-ops, and I know the other body has a version a little bit different. We'll be continuing to work on that. Sections 8 through 11 come from Senate File 183. This is a piece we've been working on for quite some time. We are not very close, but we did include this one in the bill. And Section 12 is some technical correction language from the Work Comp Advisory Council that is agreed upon. I do want to speak, there are a couple things that are not in this bill, but we are going to continue to work on with the agency, and two of those provisions especially are around meat workers protections and combative sports. It was, I think many of us heard, there was some issues, agency bills came to us late, and we were having a hard time getting all the details on everything, but we are working with them, going to continue talking about those provisions as we move forward. And then heard the discussion earlier in dealing with the energy bill, the Senator Marty amendment that we had taken in the jobs, or in the labor committee, and I believe it is a dual jurisdiction between the Labor Committee and Transportation. We were already late. This bill had to go to the Rules Committee as it was, and if we did take that piece out because it would have forced us to go to Transportation. We also were aware of some issues that it may not have passed Transportation with that in it. I am going to work with Senator Marty to continue to go down that line and figure out what can possibly be done with that. So that's what's in 3881.
That's great. Thank you very much, Senator Rarick. Any questions on the A5 amendment? Senator Pratt renews his motion on the A5 amendment. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Motion prevails. A5 is adopted. And we have one more amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to move the A7 amendment.
Senator Pratt moves the A7 amendment. It is posted. We'll hand it out now. and then we'll have testimony from our commissioners. Mr. Mum or Ms. Doyle-Fontaine, who would like to talk about the A7?
Madam Chair and members, I can. So the first section, it would amends laws from 2021, and this is for the program for forgivable loans to remote recreational businesses. This is from the Northwest Angle. This was Senator Key bill from last year, and the money is only available until April 1st of 2022. So it's already gone back to the general fund. So on line 8.29, this would make the money available until April 1st of 2023. And then it makes it retroactive to March 31st of 2022 for this amount. And then the next sections are from this laws of 2021 that were just session laws for this forgivable loan program for the Northwest Angle for those remote recreational businesses. So some date adjustments are made along the lines of allowing some more availability. All of these are being made retroactive to March 31st of 2022. And some other adjustments were being made. And there, I believe that this also relates to whether or not a loan is forgivable or not, if they're still in business and what can be forgiven. But for the most part, it is just kind of moving out some dates to allow this program to go on for a little bit longer and then allow the money to be available.
Thank you, Ms. Doyle-Fontaine. And so there is no cost to this, Mr. Mom or Ms.
Madam Chair, that's correct. Of the original $5 million appropriation, there's about $2.1 million left. The February forecast did not assume a value of the amount that canceled on April 1st. So by making the funds available, there's no scorable cost.
Thank you. Senator Champion.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I oppose the A7 amendment for the following reasons. One is I am the lead on the Jobs Committee. And on the Jobs Committee, we try to make sure that we have enough time to discuss everything that is going to be a part of a budget bill, whether that is to try to extend the date out or not. This is a new amendment that I just learned about. This was not discussed or ever heard in our committee in order to have a robust discussion. Some of the things that I think would be important would be to know why. Why were they unable to do it within that prescribed amount of time? Would there be any necessary difference by extending it out? What has the agency done in order to bring this appropriation to a conclusion? Because even as we sit here right now, Madam Chair, it's done. Program's done. The date is there. Madam Chair, also, you're very strict about wanting to make sure that there's an end date for a reason. You do not want funds just hanging out there. You don't want deadlines coming and going, and then for us just to be very loose with our fiscal management. If this is supposed to be done 4/1/2022, then we're already 6 days, 7 days late. 6 days late. And again, Madam Chair, it may be for a good reason. We don't know. But this is not the way fiscal management and things should be done. Whether we hear people say there's no additional cost, well, what about if we as a committee wanted to move those funds to someplace else? What? And so, what we are clear about is that there's money still there. There's never anything heard in our committee. We did not have an opportunity to have a robust discussion about it. There was a time fix as to when this was supposed to be done. That time has come and gone. And so I would ask the committee to vote no.
Senator Pratt.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, and we found out about this amendment after we passed the bill out of the Jobs Committee. I shared this with Senator Champion during our floor debate today when we had a chance to talk about it in the retiring room. I agree that we don't want to be loose with our fiscal management. This is extending out the deadline 1 year. I talked to Senator Uckey about this. We had a maximum amount per application, and the grant was only for the lost business during the summer of 2020 up until September 7th of 2020. And what Senator Uckey shared with me, and I think what we all realize now, is the border between the Northwest Angle and Canada was closed much, much longer than we ever anticipated. And these funds are still needed. We appropriated the funds last year. We cut the date a little bit too short. And so I think it's reasonable without any additional fiscal cost to extend that aid to those businesses that were hurt by our neighbor to the north.
Thank you, Senator Pratt. And I do want to say that Senator Uckey did make a trip down to my office. Must have been late Tuesday afternoon. He didn't have the language, didn't have the amendment, but he did apprise me of the situation here. So I do also think it's appropriate that we recognize this extension because, as you mentioned, the border opening, which just opened up in August or September of last year. Senator Champion.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Briefly, Madam Chair, if we use even the guidelines or the timeline given by Senator Pratt, we passed our bill out on April 4th. That was on Monday. This grant had already closed up, and there was more than enough time for Senator Uckey to go do his due diligence and talk to the other folks and give us the information. So again, we don't know. We're guessing right now as to really what was the issue. That's what committee hearings are for. That's why it's important before we come to the Finance Committee, where we're only talking about finances, that these things should not come up here. And it may be for a legitimate reason. I'm not suggesting that it isn't, but I think that this is an unfortunate precedent that we seem to keep setting for when something comes up at the last minute and we don't know anything about it. So that's my only concern about it, and I just ask that we be given more time by which to, discuss it. But this committee is not the place to do it. And in fact, I think Senator
I
Pratt,
totally disagree with you, Senator Champion.
Okay.
This is exactly the place to be working through these amendments.
Yeah, maybe what I'm saying, Madam Chair, is that we have a committee where it's supposed to be worked out first so that we can have an opportunity to discuss it, and then if it comes here, and then we deal with the financial implications of what's in a bill. What I'm saying is that you have held very serious that we should not be coming to the Finance Committee to work out something without giving the committee an opportunity to have its say.
Senator Champion, that the Finance Committee is the final stop before it's thrown into the omnibus bill and hits to the floor. This is absolutely the appropriate place. This does not have any fiscal implications. We are not making havoc with Senator Pratt's bill. This is something critical for Senator Uckey and his district that he serves. Like I said, I found out late Tuesday afternoon. He came to my office, and he's a very busy man with his budget too, and told me about it. So I think Senator Uckey did everything appropriate to make sure that this issue was taken care of for his district. And I would appreciate a yes vote on this A7 amendment for the very reason why I just spelled out, that I think Senator Uckey did everything right with the timing, that perhaps when he got wind of what happened. So we can make this accommodation, and I think we should take the vote. Senator Champion, do you have a final comment? You look like you did.
Yeah, I did. Look, I was doing this. Madam Chair, I was doing this, right? The last thing that I would like to say is that I don't want to get the issues mixed up from my vantage point. From my vantage point, Senator Uckey, I'm not suggesting that he didn't do his absolute very best, and once he found out the information, that he came and said something. I'm not suggesting that he didn't do that. What I'm suggesting is that we are a body, and that I am the lead on jobs. No one said anything to me about this until today during the break. And if Senator Uckey had come to you, I'm not sure when he went to Senator Pratt, but I know this. I learned nothing about it, where then I couldn't even do a little research. And in fact, I asked Senator Pratt a very pressing question, which was, okay, do we understand what happened and what could be helped? So I don't want to repeat myself, but thank you, Madam Chair. And I oppose it for the reasons that I talked about, not necessarily the underlining benefit of it.
Senator Pratt.
Madam Chair, I encourage a yes vote.
Thank you. Senator Pratt renews his motion on the A7 amendment. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. No. The motion prevails. The amendment is adopted. Okay, thank you. Any more amendments at this point? We can go to Commissioner Robertson. You've been patient. You've been here all day. Commissioner, welcome.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. I know it's been a long day, so I'll be as brief as possible.
Thank you.
I appreciate the opportunity to testify on Senate File 4091 and the A5 Amendment. For the record, my name is Rosalind Robertson, and I serve as the Commissioner of the Department of Labor and Industry. Beginning with Senate File 4091, I want to recognize and thank both Chair Pratt and Chair Rarick and Chair Rosen for the inclusion of the $175,000 in funding for police officers, state troopers, and firefighter benefit adequacy study. This funding will provide the resources needed to engage a consultant on the study of workers' compensation, disability, and pension benefits, as labor and industry expertise is limited to the workers' compensation area. Regarding the $50,000 appropriation in Article 1, Section 2, for a grant to an organization to provide experiential mental health therapy to first responders, the department suggests this appropriation is better directed to the Commissioner of Public Safety, as in the bill as it was introduced in Senate File 3615. The department has concerns with provisions in Article 2 that seek to amend the employee notification and penalty provisions of the wage theft law. Many of the changes in the bill we don't believe it's needed, as they reflect how the department has interpreted the current law. Other provisions we do object to, as they undermine the intent of the law to prevent and address wage theft and ensure employees are paid the wages they are owed. Turning to the A5 Amendment, I urge the committee to reconsider funding the Youth Skill Training Program increase at the requested amount, and increase of $25,000 one time would not be sufficient to even fund one additional partnership in the state when the demand for this program for 16 and 17-year-old student learners continue to greatly exceed the available resources. I appreciate that the amendment includes two fixes in Article 4. The construction code licensing fee reduction language correction in Section 2, and the addition of effective dates to the Workers' Compensation Advisory Council recommendation that became law earlier in this session under Section 13. I will note, however, unlike the department proposal, the amendment does not sunset the building permit and plan review fee reductions on October 1st, 2023, as all other reduced fees within the agency. The department prefers this sunset as it will provide the department an opportunity to evaluate the balance in the construction code fund to determine whether an ongoing fee reduction is fiscally reasonable. Regarding the provisions included in the amendment, the department has no concerns with the window cleaning safety provisions in Article 4, Section 1, or the compromise reached by stakeholders on work exempted from elevator contractor licensing in Section 3 through 5. In terms of the load management device provisions in Section 6 and 7 of Article 4, I commend Chair Rarick for working diligently with all stakeholders on this issue. While the department does have some concerns with the language as currently drafted, I do understand that this work is ongoing, and we commit to continuing to work with all stakeholders to find an acceptable resolution. Last, regarding the backflow prevention provisions in Section 8 through 12 in Article 4, the Minnesota Plumbing Board, the experts who oversee the adoption of the Minnesota Plumbing Code, discussed this provision at a recent special meeting, and they unanimously concluded that they do not support this exemption as it has the potential to compromise safe drinking water. Finally, I strongly believe the agency's supplemental budget priorities should be reconsidered for inclusion in this bill. Priorities such as earned sick and safe time and paid family and medical leave would support hardworking Minnesotans. Certainly, we learned during COVID we will all need paid leave at some point in time. Oftentimes, workers who are interrupted from their work due to sickness or their family illnesses, those that do not have paid time off have to make the difficult decision of whether going to work sick or not being able to support their own individual needs. The prevailing wage increase would ensure the agency can meet its enforcement and education obligation due to the pending influx of federal funding for public infrastructure projects coming to the state that will be subject to prevailing wage laws. An increase in apprenticeship and the LEAP grant program funding are important to training and reskilling workers and improving the participation and retention of women, people of color, and indigenous people in registered apprenticeship programs. The agency's proposal for fair labor standards for agricultural and food processing workers were recommended by the Committee for Safety, Health, and Well-being of Agricultural and Food Processing Workers and would expand protections and build awareness of workplace rights. The Commercial Energy Code improvements would help put Minnesota back on track to achieve our greenhouse gas reduction goals. Assisted living facility plan reviews and inspections would ensure safe housing for the elderly, and the 2-year license fee holiday for building and construction trades would provide economic relief to an estimated 87,000 licensees. Combative sports regulatory changes would better protect combatants' safety and health. OSHA federal penalty conformity would ensure continued federal funding and would encourage Minnesota employers to continue to take workplace safety and health more seriously. I look forward to the continued work on these initiatives in conference committee. This concludes my prepared remarks. I thank the committee for your time, and I'm happy to respond to any questions.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Robertson, for being here, too. I do appreciate that. Are there any questions? Commissioner? No. Wonderful. Well, I appreciate you continuing to work on the combative sports.
Yes.
And the meat processing, okay. Interesting. Did that just come down recently, some of the information, or has it been ongoing conversation? Senator Barry?
Madam Chair, the meat processors is something that's been being worked on for quite some time. The combative sports is a fairly new subject.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Well, I appreciate it. I don't see any questions for you, Commissioner, but thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
And we do have some deputy commissioners here, if anyone would like to come up and. You two have also been very patient.
Come on up, guys. Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Kevin McKinnon. I'm the Deputy Commissioner of Economic Development at DEED. Commissioner Grove is not available, and we do have 3 deputies here today, one of which is on remote, and so I'll pass it to him here in a minute. But on behalf of DEED, I want to extend our thanks to Senator Pratt and the members of the committee for their work on the Omnibus bill. I want to take this opportunity as well to note that Governor Walz and Lieutenant Governor Flanagan's budget to move Minnesota forward included an economic plan to build on Minnesota's economic success by investing in students, workers, communities, and small businesses, the things that made our state's economy strong in the first place.
Well,
Today
you're
I'll-
Kevin McKinnon. Nice to meet you finally. The famous Kevin McKinnon.
Madam Chair,
Very nice to meet you. I hate to break in there, but it all of a sudden just clicked on. So we've had many lengthy conversations on the phone, so really appreciate you being here in person.
We have, Madam Chair, and it's been a few years actually since I've been up here in front of your committee, so
Right.
Good to be back.
Good to be
Thanks.
back, yeah, for sure.
So I just wanted to highlight some areas of support and some areas of concern in the Omnibus bill. It's notable that only a small fraction of the governor's economic development investments were included in the Omnibus bill. The priorities not included were enhancements to the Launch Minnesota program, funding for a marketing campaign to attract talent and business opportunities, financial support to our nonprofits that have helped us accelerate through the COVID-19 pandemic recovery, investments in small business assistance, and additional funding for the Main Street Revitalization Program. Finally, this bill makes no investments in addressing climate initiatives. The investments we make now into the state's economy are likely to have impacts for decades into the future, and failing to make these kinds of commitments could hinder our state's ability to be competitive and successful for years to come. I do want to extend my appreciation for some items that the bill does include, such as specific language tied to the energy transition grants, the Minnesota Investment Fund, and Job Creation Fund extensions, including federally recognized tribes for the purposes of the contaminated site cleanup funding, making a change that will allow federal loan funds received from the Department of Treasury to be utilized consistent with the State Small Business Credit Initiative that we are due to receive and deploy this summer, and adding tribal businesses, municipal and county hospitals for the Minnesota Job Skills Partnership Program is important to include these types of businesses. So now, if I can turn this over to my colleague, Mark Majors, who is on video, I hope.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Commissioner.
Welcome.
Good afternoon, thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Chair Rosen and members of the committee. My name is Mark Majors, and I am the Deputy Commissioner for Workforce Development at DEED. Workforce challenges are the most pressing concerns we hear from businesses as they scramble to find workers across employment sectors. It is notable that the Senate's Job Omnibus bill fails to make new and strategic investments in workforce training and modernization. When workforce challenges are deeply present throughout Minnesota's economy, this bill fails to invest in growing our workforce when those investments are at the forefront of the governor's recommendations and are necessary for Minnesota to be competitive for workers and businesses. The governor's priorities not reflected here include investments in the youth tech talent pipeline, the adult technology reskilling, funding for clean tech workforce training, resources to modernize DEED's workforce tools, and the creation of paid family and medical leave programs. There are also no investments in new workers in our economy, be it the creation of an Office of New Americans in Agricultural and Food Processing Workers. I appreciate that the governor's recommended policies and language changes were included in the Senate's Omnibus bill, including some policies around pay for performance, clarifying changes in definition of displaced homemakers, and small changes to the definition for the uniform report card that will provide some increased clarity. DEED also shared some technical issues with the Jobs Committee earlier, and I appreciate your attention to those. Specifically, I want to emphasize problematic language tied to requirements for grants to not-for-profit organizations, as well as pay for performance language. I want to thank you. I appreciate the committee's attention to my comments, and I'll turn it over to my colleague, Evan Rowe.
Thank you, Deputy Commissioner. Deputy Commissioner Evan Rowe.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I'm Evan Rowe, Deputy Commissioner for Operations and Workforce Services at DEED. And I just wanted to weigh in finally and very briefly on the unemployment insurance overpayment report that was included in the Senate Jobs Omnibus. The department absolutely shares the Senate's concerns around malicious actors attempting to gain illegitimate benefits through the unemployment insurance system. And that department is constantly collaborating with the U.S. Department of Labor, which has federal jurisdictional oversight over the program. And any sort of reporting that we do to DOL, we are very happy to make that information available to the legislature. And we're also very happy to work with you and the Jobs Committee to focus on improving processes around fraud and other similar challenges. We are constantly paying attention to this, and it is absolutely at the top of the list of making improvements to the program in every circumstance. We did share a number of technical notes with Chair Pratt and the Jobs Committee regarding the language as proposed in the bill, and we are eager to work with the Jobs Committee on those issues as the bill moves forward. Thank you for the opportunity to appear here today, and we're committed to working with the Senate, and we thank you in advance for consideration of this feedback.
Thank you, Deputy Commissioner Rowe. Senator Champion.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This question is for Mr. Majors. Mr. Majors, what impact will the pay for performance language have on communities of color, especially that some percentage of it, I think the way the language is formed is going to come from the Workforce Development Fund, and that's been the main source of equity funds. So can you tell us what sort of impact the pay for performance language has on communities of color that DEED is recommending?
Deputy Commissioner Majors.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Senator Champion. The current structure of the pay for performance is actually being used by one agency as we stand. In the last session, 4 additional organizations were actually awarded grants, and they were using the pay for performance model. After conversations, Deed having conversations with those agencies, they disclosed that the model that's in place for payment is burdensome to them. Without going into a whole bunch of detail, but as you can see, is we amended the pay for performance model so that we could give grantees a 10% admin cost off the top of the actual grant, as well as 20% to assist them with their direct training. And then there's the increment goals that are tied to the milestones. The intention there, and we still have to see if this works, is to not make organizations have to wait 2 years before they get a payment, because they won't be able to endure the burden of actually running a program for 2 years before they get payment. So the restructuring was after speaking with our new grantees, hearing from them exactly if this will work, and this is the model that we're proposing. Now, we're going to have to see. And this is the first opportunity of breaking up those payments into milestones. And we hope that it is fair so that organizations can continue to provide services, but also stay within the model of pay for performance. Thank you.
Follow-up, Madam Chair?
Champion?
Deputy Commissioner, can you identify who those organizations were that you spoke to, and whether those are majority-led organizations or if they're organization of color? That's one. And the second question is, isn't it true that an organization has to put forth the money first in order to receive money on the back end, and that historically organizations of color have not always been as well resourced? Is that your experience? And if so, can you speak to why you then would be promoting the pay for performance model?
Deputy Commissioner Majors?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Senator Champion. I just want to reiterate that this is the first time outside that one agency, which was TC Rise, that had been working under the pay for performance model. The 4 additional can you hear me or can you not hear me? Senator, sorry.
It's kind of hard
Senator
for
Champion.
me to hear you.
Okay.
Oops, you're freezing up, Deputy Majors. Maybe you want to, you're freezing up. Can you turn your video off, please?
Apologize. Yes, we'll do that.
That may be better.
Is that a little bit better?
Yes. Let's try that. Maybe.
Be that was I'm sorry.
Says Deed's network bandwidth is low. Sorry.
I'm looking at the operations.
I truly hope not.
Oh, there you go. You're coming in.
Madam Chair, okay. Madam Chair. 4 agencies are a
Deputy Commissioner, you are in and out. We cannot make heads or tails. Try that again.
The 4 organizations that are Avivo, YMCA, St. Paul, International Institute, and TC Rise. And yeah, those are the organizations. The question is for you. Sorry.
Senator Champion?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The question was, of those 4 that he's named, he was going to share if they're majority-led or people of color-led, because there's been some questions around whether, communities of color, especially when they have agencies, they're less resourced to be able to put the money up front for pay for performance model. And so he was speaking to that question, because Twin Cities Rise certainly is not it is majority-led, as is Avivo's, as is the Y. And so if those are the organizations that he was talking to, then maybe a better question is for one of the folks who are up here then to tell us why you think if Deed has been thinking about an equity model, why that would be something that you all would put forward.
You know, Senator Champion, before I was the chief author of this bill back in 2012, and it sat on the books, and I think it's funded through appropriation bonds, I believe, and it was not utilized. And actually, Commissioner Showalter, we talked about this, but at Twin City Rise testified in support of the bill back in 2012, and they want that model. They want to be able to prove that they can deliver the results. I thought it was very fascinating. But Deputy Commissioner Majors.
Yeah, thank you, Senator Champion. You're absolutely right. They are majority-led organizations. And you asked the other question around if these grants are reimbursement-based. So yes, the agencies would have to have, either way, would have to have funding ahead of time. That is one of the reasons why we feel like we still need to look at this model, and we have concerns about actually moving forward with the 25% and the 50% marker that's been suggested at this point. We would like to see if we go through this model of using the 10% admin as well as the 20% for direct services, and then looking at those milestones thereafter to see if that actually fits for all of our organizations, and then eventually move to the 25 and the 50% mark. So we would like to take a couple of years to evaluate the effectiveness of that.
And last question,
sure.
Last thing on this topic, Madam Chair, I believe the Deed has the ability to do the pay-for-performance model even without coming through this particular process before the legislature. It's also pretty interesting to me that the commissioner indeed would be proposing this, especially with them saying that they, believe in equity. And you're right, it worked for certain communities, like Twin Cities Rise did say that it worked for them, but they were also very clear in saying it doesn't work for everyone, and that they understand that there are these equitable differences. And so it's just a little interesting to me, and I wanted to get this on the record and for the rest of the public to really kind of hear the direction that Deed is going, that isn't as equity-filled as I think they tend to portray. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Champion. Any further questions? Okay. Really nice to see you.
Great.
Thank you so much for your work. Was that 2 years ago or last year?
Probably both. With
Yeah.
Senator Pratt.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, we spent a lot of time, and I'm sure Representative Gunther will be jealous. I'll tell him hi for you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much to all of you. Appreciate it. Any more amendments? Any comments? Senator Champion. Senator Marty.
Madam Chair, I was going to ask on behalf of a number of members of the committee if Mr. Mumm could go over the spreadsheets again, because I think he went through them so fast. I think we missed some things. But maybe there wasn't. Anyway.
That was actually very funny, Senator Marty.
I don't know. I thought I missed something, but maybe went through them through.
There's a missing few numbers there.
But, Madam Chair, I did want to comment, no amendment or anything, but wanted to comment on the wage theft legislation, and maybe there's a question in here, but I think that what passed the wage theft legislation 2-3 years ago was really important stuff. And there are a lot of workers who are basically ripped off. I mean, by powerful thief that they can't get back at or anything. And the fact that we're taking away penalties for the first violation of some of the notice things that I think the bill caps the maximum penalty for somebody who's violating this repeatedly. I think it's like with penalties was 20 days worth of wages. So if I'm an employer and I steal a month's worth of wages from employees, I'm better off taking the maximum penalty and doing it. And to me, the law is a good law, and maybe it needs some tweaks or so on, but here, reducing the notice requirements when you have to work there, they don't have to give you any notice till you've been there a week already. I just think they're weakening every step along the way, and then eliminating the penalties when you violate those weakened standards, and no penalty the first time. And if you do the worst behavior, the most you can be penalized may be less than what you're stealing from the worker. So I'm just curious why this change needs to be made.
Senator Pratt.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, and Senator Marty for that question. And, I jotted down some notes when Commissioner Robertson was up here as well. I was the chief author of the wage theft bill. I agree with you. I think we made some really, really important changes. But I also know what the intention of the wage theft bill was. And the intent was really to recognize that most employers are good employers. They're fair employers. And there's only a small minority that aren't. And we talked about that in the conference committee when we were putting together the bill, and that was something that we could at least agree on. The intent was to balance the protections for the employees with ensuring that we weren't putting an undue burden on implementation for the employers. Now, when we talk about the first-time grace, it's interesting that Senator Johnson Stewart brought that up in our committee, because what we're talking about is first-time forgiveness only for the pre-employment wage theft notification. That if you're doing something wrong and they find, and somebody comes in and finds it, and the only thing that's been done is the paperwork, that's the only violation that's part of that we're willing to forgive that first time. That's the only forgiveness we're giving, Senator Marty. And I don't think that in any way undermines the intent of the law and the protections to employees. What it's saying is that we have what could be a very concerning, a mistake that's replicated multiple times, unintentionally, and we want to make sure that employers are corrected for the first time. They're maybe guided on how to do it right, but they get that grace that first time. With the 20 days notification, the original law was that the maximum number of penalties was 15 days. The maximum number of penalties was 15 days. So if the Department of Labor made a demand for wages, you had 10 days to comply. If you did not comply, you started accruing a penalty on those wages, which equaled 1 day's worth of wages for a maximum of 15 days. Senator Marty, I think that was an oversight when we did the bill originally, because the Department of Labor said the 15 days isn't enough of an incentive to get these bad actors to comply with the demand on wages. But what we're also finding is that now there's no incentive for employees to settle and come to an agreement, because they have an unlimited amount of penalties that they can accrue that go to the employee and their lawyer. And so all we're trying to do here, Senator Marty, is balance it out. Now, I made a change from 15 to 20 days this session because I've been reaching out to the Labor Committee. I've been reaching out to Commissioner Robertson, saying this is the only penalty in law that I know that's unlimited and penalizes somebody if they decide that they want to challenge the department's order to stand up for their own rights. We have to find that balance between employer and employees. I'm not saying 20 days is the right number. I'm saying that somewhere along the line there's a penalty that encourages employees to come to an agreement and employers to make the payments that they owe the employees. The other thing along the wage theft notice, Madam Chair, is that we found out it's not working very well for temporary employment agencies. And we had testimony about one that is an outplacement service for nurses. They don't know where the nurse is going to be deployed. They don't know where the nurse is going to be, how much it is. They might make one rate if they're in pediatrics. They might make another rate if they're in an ER. They might make another rate if they're in the ICU. And what we're finding is that as the current law sits, it's not working for those types of placements. So we want to have some flexibility for temporary agencies. And along the number of days for giving that wage theft notice, that was actually something that's coming to us from school districts, Senator Marty. They're having a hard time complying with that. Look, we think every employee should know what they're making before they accept a job. And what we're talking about here is a administrative function. We allow many administrative functions to happen post-employment. You fill out your tax withholding post-employment. You fill out your I-9 after employment. We just want to make sure that these documents are included in that same timeline as all of the other documents that you do upon starting a job.
Madam Chair, can I ask a question on that point?
Senator Champion.
Senator Pratt, can you tell us in the committee how many violations were issued by Dolly or the Department of Labor and Industry, I'm sorry, all around this notion that you are talking about?
Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Senator Champion, I think you'll recall in committee that the Commissioner testified to 0.
And the only reason I wanted that highlighted is because if there's no problem, I don't know why we would be attempting to go around the coalition. So I'll yield back. I listened too much to the federal folks today. I yield back like I have something to yield back.
Madam Chair.
Very good, Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, I would disagree with Senator Champion's characterization that I'm trying to go around the coalition. I've made every attempt to work with and find compromise with the coalition on this. We found some very good parts that we've been able to come to an agreement on. Just because no violations have been assessed now, does that mean that we shouldn't be looking at the law to prevent penalties for honest mistakes in the future?
Any further? Senator Marty.
Madam Chair, I just think that the idea that these tend to be the lowest wage workers, the ones who are most struggling to get by, they're not, I don't know when they contact the commissioner, but I don't think I think that's kind of their last resort. I think you're hitting people who are very vulnerable, and by the time it gets settled, I mean, I think to me it's a slap in the wrist. I just think this 20 days is a pretty small amount for somebody who, because again, when the clock starts ticking on that, is that after they contact the commissioner?
Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Senator Marty, I believe it's the penalty kicks in after the 10-day demand from the Department of Labor. I'm not going to argue whether it should be 15 or 20 days. I've been trying to work with the coalition to find out what that right balance should be. I'm not saying 20 days is the right number. We moved it by 5 days to signal the fact that we're willing to negotiate and find that balance. I've not had a willing partner coming back from the coalition to say that something less than unlimited is acceptable. I am not, as the chief author of this bill back in 2019, I am not looking to undermine any of the protections for workers that we did. This is a law that has that was groundbreaking and has been used as a template in other states. And I'm proud that we did that work. It wasn't easy. But I also have to realize, and I think we all should recognize, that oftentimes we don't write a law perfectly the first time. And so, Senator Marty, if you don't think 20 days is right, I would love you to join me and let's talk to the coalition and find out what that right balance is. Because I would certainly like to find it.
Madam Chair, you're making it sound like it's a move from 15 days to 20 days. It was a move that was fixed last time with unlimited, so the bad actors aren't going to keep bad acting. And here you're saying, okay, we're taking unlimited and bringing it down to 20 days. I just think that that's a slap on the wrist. I mean, that's, to me, I think you are undercutting the law. I think the law is a good law, I agree we can tweak things. I'm not arguing that. I'm just saying that I think that you're taking something, you're taking some of the most vulnerable workers who have very little clout about this. The only thing they have is the fact we have some penalties now, and you're making the penalties enough that a lot of them are just going to go ahead. If you're a bad actor, you violate the law and you just accept the penalty because it's not strong enough.
Madam Chair and Senator
Senator
Marty,
Pratt.
we always had penalties. We had 15 days worth of penalties prior to the wage theft law. And so I'm not arguing that 15 days wasn't too short. But this does not cap the recoverable wages in any way. If you had your wages stolen for 3 months, you can still recover 3 months worth of wages. What we're talking about is the penalty. And I would be open. And I have talked to the coalition many times. I need to put something in the bill to say I'm willing to talk about this. And I made a move in this bill to signal that I'm willing to talk about this. And I've had several conversations with Commissioner Robertson and people on the coalition. I've not gotten any cooperation back. And like I say, I know the intent when we built it. I want to make sure those protections are there. I think you're focused on the 20 days, and I understand that. I would love to have a conversation on what's fair. I've asked the coalition to come back to me with some ideas, and they haven't.
Very good. Okay, Senator Kent.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I share a little bit of the, and again, this a bit goes back to the conversation about guidelines or non-targets or whatever we're calling them. So if I do the math, it's 250,000 is approximately the number that you were given. And in this moment when I feel like our communities are struggling with workforce, I find that kind of amazing. But I did want to reflect on something that we heard from our testifiers today, and I particularly appreciate the support and work done by Commissioner Robertson and, as mentioned, by Deputy Commissioner Majors, with having worked with Commissioner Grove on this, talking about the importance of paid family and medical leave. And I believe it was Commissioner Robertson who mentioned that if we didn't learn anything out of the pandemic, it was that our workforce and our entire system and the families are completely unsupported by our current system. I appreciate that Senator Coleman, Senator Nelson have started talking about this issue. I've carried this bill now for 6 years. But it's time, it's past time. We have to do something, and the reality is we need, as is in Commissioner Robertson's letter, a comprehensive paid family and medical leave insurance program, because that would provide Minnesotans the economic stability they need and the needed time when a situation arises. You know, and we often talk about the birth or adoption of a baby or a child. We talk about the illness or an aging relative. We talk about a worker's own significant illness or injury that sidelines them for a time from work so that they take the time they need to heal and get whatever treatments they need, and then they can come back and be a very effective employee. But you know, right now, their options are very limited. And it's frustrating for employers. I mean, we know big employers do this. We know they don't do that just to be nice. They do it because it's good business. They do it because they want to keep good people. And they do it because they have the larger pool with which they can do it. And then they can also attract and retain good employees. But if we really want to make a difference for Minnesotans, we need a comprehensive plan. In my work on this issue, the thing that has struck me the hardest is a statistic that says a quarter to a third, or about 25 to 35% of women who give birth go back to work within 2 weeks of giving birth. 2 weeks. There is not anyone who has given birth or been around somebody who gave birth that thinks someone chooses to go back to work inside of 2 weeks. And what I would say is that we are not going to solve this and take care of those mothers and babies and families without a comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan that I have proposed would cover all working people in Minnesota. It would provide up to 12 weeks of family leave, as described. It would provide up to 12 weeks of medical leave for significant illness or injury, and that includes pregnancy complications. It would replace wages on a sliding scale based on income up to 90% for lower income workers, but at lower levels for higher waged employees with a cap. And it's so important because of the many ways that it does support workers. It provides leave in cases of military deployment or if someone is escaping a dangerous living situation. There are job protections. There's no discrimination based on gender, age, or pre-existing conditions. It's portable. When it's done this way, it is portable. So you don't have to rely on, oh, my employer has it, but I'm going to change a job, and maybe that one won't have it. Or I've taken this job with this employer based on what they had at the time, and then a year later they say, you know what, I'm changing my policy, and now you don't have access to that same leave. And the decision to take leave is up to the worker and their doctor, not to insurance or employers. And what is most compelling in all of this to me is that the costs are 0.3% for employer and employee each, about $3.43 a week for the average Minnesota worker, the proverbial cup of coffee, as we say. And what we know from, what has been proposed to have tax credits or incentives for businesses to provide it through the private insurance market, it's at least twice as expensive to do it that way per employee, at least. And we have it capped, and so we'll never make a dent in that 25 to 35% of mothers who have to go back to work within 2 weeks. So I appreciate that there are good things in this bill. I share the sentiments that we heard in our testimony. This is something that we need to do. Many states are doing it. This proposal is modeled after our existing systems. It builds on something that's already there, and what we've learned from the other states and what works. And I also think it's very interesting. The states that have this, they've given a pretty good tire kicking in the past couple years, and it's worked well. And so I think that's a real powerful case study that it will work in Minnesota, and it would work for Minnesotans and their employers. And so this is a real oversight that we did not even consider this, once again, and certainly that it is not in this bill. Thank you.
Senator Kent. Senator Champion.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for the opportunity to speak. As I mentioned earlier, I am the ranking member for the minority party on the Jobs Committee. And I'll say a couple things. One, before I get into my closing messages, one of the things I did talk to Senator Pratt about is that we were not going to put forth amendments. We were just going to talk about the things that we felt was either missing or could have been enhanced or just a little different. One of the reasons why I took that position is because I'm not necessarily all for, just constantly putting forth amendments and for those things to be tossed down. And the second part of it is that I think sometime when amendments would be appropriate if we're really close when it comes to a bill reflecting our values going forward. So one of the things that I will say is what's disappointing, what's in the bill, is Senator Pratt taking the guidance from DEED around the pay for performance. And you heard the questions that I asked. And the reason why I asked those questions is because I wanted to be very clear that the 4 organizations that were talked to in order to support pay for performance were not communities of color. No one was asked even the question around it, even though there's been a lot of discussion about pay for performance and how historically communities of color-led organizations are not as well resourced as others, and we're trying to change that because we think that is important. But what's also important about the provision in your bill and taking the lead from DEED is that the 4 organizations are going to dictate 50% of the funds. So from our calculations, 50% of those funds are going to be dictated by what the majority community says. And that's coming from DEED and someone who's supposed to be in a better space at pushing the notion of equity. So I hope that changes, and I'm certainly interested in having a discussion with the administration around some of the things that I see. But when we think in terms of this bill, the job bill, in my opinion, is an important tool to get Minnesotans across the state trained, for us to support small business owners with capacity and resources, and the bill should invest in growth of people and business. And with a surplus of at our disposal of $9.9 billion creates the opportunity for what I call transformative change. And I just think this bill, as I mentioned to my good friend Senator Pratt, that I believe that this bill fails to meet the moment. It fails to make the necessary investments to move Minnesotans forward. I know he articulated and regurgitated some of the things that we did last year, but simply to say it's not a budget year or what we did last year is not a reason for not making the needed investments feels hollow. Important moments in history doesn't always happen during our preferred timeline. Like, we often think it would be great to just do it during a budget year, but the moment requires preparation to meet the opportunity to yield success. And this bill appears to miss the opportunity to meet the moment to move our state forward and invest in our future in order to continue making us nationally, regionally, and globally competitive. We are leaving the space for success to our neighbors and our competitors. I often say that I don't want Wisconsin to beat us. I don't want Iowa to beat us. I don't want the Dakota to beat us. I want no one to beat us. I want folks to understand that Minnesota should be a welcoming place for all of us to live, work, and play. But what I also think the bill ignores is Dr. Columbakidis, who testified before this very committee about the importance of investing in our communities of color who sit on the sidelines in order to remain a great place to work, play, learn, and earn. And this bill fails to heed to that call, that warning, or that important guidance. This bill will be seen as and known for what is woefully missing. I know that sometimes during the negotiation process that we put forth a position, the House puts forth a position, and the administration puts forth a position, and there's the hope that somewhere in all those various positions that we'll find a bill through great compromise that will be helpful to us. And I can only hope that is so when we think in terms of our job bill. I think we have good intentions, but good intentions don't always get it done. We have to be very intentional about what we do. And I hope to be a part of those discussions, because I think even listening sometime to some of our agencies may not always prove fruitful, because they too have blinders on at times, which is kind of highlighted in this bill, that I believe that there are blinders that are being worn. And just really, when I just talk about this bill being known for what is woefully missing, it simply misses the mark. And I hope, again, that you're open, Senator Pratt, to making changes that would invest in our communities, especially communities of color, from all across this great state, because we all do better when we all do better. But if we don't make some intentional decisions that will deal with the challenges that we have encountered with responsible policies, then we'll continue to be in the same place. And I think Einstein had it right, that if we do the same thing and expect different results, then that's insanity. And none of us are insane. We all have a desire to move Minnesota forward. So until that change occurs, I can't support the jobs bill in its current form, and I'll continue to talk to you and Chair Knorr and the administration in hopes of us landing in a better place. So thank you so very much, Madam Chair, for your patience in allowing me to just speak to the things I believe to be important. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Champion. And I do think that all of us can work better on our communication in communicating some of the issues that we have to back and forth. So, thank you. Senator Pratt, final comments. Or Senator Rarick, would you like to start and then?
Thank you, Madam Chair and members, and Senator Champion, I might have to disagree a little bit. Some people might think that by doing this, we are a bit insane, so. You know, I think it was brought up earlier, and the one I want to just touch a little bit. You know, I've been working with Senator Pratt a lot with the wage theft corrections. You know, in the portion of the bill that I brought forward, you know, I have a number of provisions in there that I've been working on that are far less complex than the wage theft bill, and we've been working for 2 to 3 plus years on those provisions, trying to get those through and get agreements and get people to engage. So I don't find it unreasonable at all that we would be coming back trying to make some changes to the wage theft that have been brought forward. I had my electrical co-op brought forward the very first year after this went into effect. The first thing their HR person did when I came to visit was come and say, there are some issues that need to be addressed with the wage theft. So I think it's very reasonable to have Senator Pratt continuing to work when that went through in one session. We saw the importance and we got it through, but we have to understand there are some tweaks that need to be done there. And I think, you know, like I said, in my portion of the bill, there are a number of things being worked on yet, and we are going to continue to work with the agencies and the other bodies, and I appreciate their willingness to work and continue to engage. And so thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Rarick. You bet. Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll be brief. It's, you know, it's easy sometimes for us to come back and look at things on a year-by-year basis. And the reason I went back to talk about last year and the biennial process that we're in is because I think we do have to look at this on a 2-year cycle. We made historic investments in our economy last year, and Madam Chair, you were front and center on that with $150 million into a Main Street revitalization program that has spurred economic development across the state. With additional grants to small businesses that were hurt. We did 4 small business grant programs, 2 loan programs, nearly $500 million in business relief, trying to keep businesses from not putting plywood in the windows once they locked their doors. And we weren't able to stop all of the closures, but I believe we did stem a number of them off. We spent a record amount out of the Workforce Development Fund last year. Monies allocated last year that will continue into the next fiscal year. It's not just about the increases. I think we have to go back and look at what was spent in the previous biennium as well. And that's why I want to look at this in a 2-year cycle to say, we have really done a lot in jobs and economic growth over this biennium. One of the things that I want to finish with is something that this committee took up early in the session around unemployment insurance. This is the most significant economic hurdle that we face today. It costs more to put somebody to work because the House has not passed unemployment insurance reform or replenishment. We made a promise to businesses when we asked them to close down, when we told them to close down and they were forced to lay off their employees, we told them we would hold them harmless. And we've not kept that promise. The House has not kept that promise. I don't know that a marketing program to attract new business here when we have these exorbitant payroll taxes will drive anybody to bring their business here. I don't know that, I do know that these payroll taxes are suppressing real wage growth, or they're passing that cost on to their consumers and exacerbating inflation. So yes, this has modest expenditures in it. But when you look at the overall, what we've done with replenishing unemployment insurance and paying off the federal debt, when you look at the record investments we made in the last session that are continuing into this session and this year. I think it's a pretty good record of investing in our state, investing in our economy, and making sure that Minnesota can remain competitive. So, Madam Chair, I move, I don't know what the motion is. I'll let Mr. Fisher tell me.
Actually, Senator Ingebrigtsen. Oh, okay. Senator Pratt moves that Senate File 4091 be amended with the contents of 3510 as amended, and Senate File 4269 and staff be allowed to make technical and conforming changes.
Madam Chair, that is my motion.
And Madam Chair, can I request a roll call?
Roll call requested, roll call granted. We have more motions.
Madam Chair, on the
Senator Benson.
motion, the Senjem bill was amended. Did you incorporate that into your motion?
We are going to continue to incorporate, so I'm not sure if you want to do the roll call now.
No. I wanted to wait until.
The very end.
Yes.
You're requesting a roll call for the final
Yes.
move. Okay.
Sorry about
We will
that,
just
Madam
move
Chair.
that. Okay. Okay. On, Mr.
Madam
Fisher,
Chair.
let's try this again. Senator Pratt moves that Senate File 4091 be amended with the contents of 3510 as amended, and Senate File 4269 as amended, and staff be allowed to make technical and conforming changes. All those in favor of that motion, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Motion prevails. Senator Pratt moves that Senate File 4091 as amended be recommended to pass and placed on general orders. A roll call has been requested, a roll call granted. Ms. Johnson, please take the roll.
Chair Rosen,
Chair votes aye.
Vice Chair Ingebrigtsen,
Aye.
Senator Marty,
No.
Senator Benson,
Yes.
Senator Champion,
No.
Senator Johnson,
Yes.
Senator Kent,
No.
Senator Kiffmeyer, Senator Lopez Franzen, Senator Pratt,
Aye.
Senator Kiffmeyer, Senator Lopez Franzen,
There being 5 ayes and 3 noes, Senate File 4091 as amended is placed on general orders. Okay, thank you, Senator Pratt. Thank you, Senator Rarick.
Madam Chair, thank you, members.
Okay, members, we are done for the day, and we will be back after our spring break. We have a hearing on April 19th. We're going to do, just a couple little bills, the education bill and the HHS bill. That was a joke, too, but it's a small little day.
Madam Chair, you're expecting them both on, is that Tuesday?
Yes, Tuesday, the 19th, yes.
Thank you.
Okay, any further questions? So, members, I hope you have a great vacation. Relax, everybody come back refreshed. With that, Senate Finance Committee is adjourned.